Imagine you're exploring, maybe an old house, could even be your own, and you find something.
Yeah.
Some feature that just it makes no sense today.
Right.
It clearly looks like it belonged. It was for something, but what? You have no idea.
Uh-huh.
Think about like those little alcoves in the wall where old rotary phones used to sit.
Yeah, you know what you mean.
Or maybe a sealed-up slot that used to be for ice delivery or
Yeah.
milk. Or those tiny coal chute doors you see sometimes.
Forgotten functions.
Exactly. And the article we're delving into today, it even mentioned this thing called the third condiment mystery.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently some kind of shaker that was just as common on Victorian tables as salt and pepper, but now nobody knows what was in it.
Nah.
It really makes us stop and think, how fast can something completely normal just become an enigma?
It's a great way to frame it. That feeling of, like, holding something from the past. You see the shape, the design, but the actual reason for it, poof, gone.
The context just evaporates.
Precise.
And that feeling is exactly what we're digging into today, but with a mystery that's centuries older. We are taking a deep dive into one of archaeology's most, persistent and baffling puzzles, the Roman dodecahedron.
Ah, yes. This is one of those artifacts that really shows you the limits, We've got the object, loads of them even, but history just doesn't mention them.
So this deep dive is built around an article called The Mystery of the Roman Dodecahedron. Our mission here is to unpack everything that source says we do know about these weird things, look at all the different theories people have come up with, and really try to understand why. Why, after finding over 100 of them, decades of study, why are they still such a mystery?
It's a bit of history, geometry, a lot of guesswork.
And maybe a bit of just admitting we don't know.
Definitely some archaeological humility involved, yeah. It's like detective work with half the clues just missing.
Okay, so let's start with the object itself. What is it? Paint a picture for us.
Right. So basically, it's this small, hollow object. You could probably hold one in your palm, usually made of bronze, sometimes copper, maybe brass.
Okay.
And its defining feature is the shape. It's got 12 flat faces, and each face is a pentagon.
A five-sided shape. So like a 12-sided die, but with pentagons.
Exactly. But then it gets weirder.
How so? The holes and knobs?
Yeah. Each one of those 12 pentagon faces has a round hole in it. But the holes aren't all the same size. They actually vary quite a bit, even on the same object.
Different size holes.
Okay.
And the knobs.
Right. At every point where the edges meet the vertices, there's a little round knob sticking out.
So 12 pentagon faces, 12 different size holes, 20 little knobs. Got it. That's the basic blueprint. Now, where do these turn up and when? That's got to tell us something.
Well, the article is pretty clear. They're found scattered across northern Europe, specifically in places that were Roman territory back then. Think Britain, France, Germany.
Basically Roman Gaul and surrounding areas.
Exactly. And this is really important, the geography.
Why is that?
Because the source stresses that not a single one, not one, has ever been found down in Italy or in Rome itself.
Huh. So they're Roman artifacts, but definitely not from the Roman heartland. Provincial Roman.
Precisely. That's a key piece of the puzzle.
Interesting. And where exactly in these northern provinces are they found? Like what kind of sites?
This actually adds to the confusion because the sites are pretty diverse. They've shown up in Roman military camps.
Okay, so just one thing.
But also in the graves of wealthy or elite women.
Whoa, okay. Military camps and high-status women's burials, that's different.
Right, and sometimes even just like in old riverbeds.
Military sites, fancy graves, rivers, that doesn't exactly narrow it down, does it?
Mm-hmm.
And the time period. When were these things around?
Mostly they date from the 2nd to the 4th centuries CE. So you're looking at the High Roman Empire, maybe bleeding into the Late Roman period, but specifically in those northern provinces.
Right. And how many are we talking about? Are they super rare? Or?
The article mentions around 133 found so far.
Okay, so not just a couple of weird one-offs.
Yeah.
Enough to know they were a thing.
Definitely a thing. But not so many that they feel like, a standard issue, mass-produced item across the whole empire.
All right, so we've got a pretty good picture of the what, the where, the when. We know the look, the material, the specific time and place in the Roman world, even the types of spots they end up. But now we get to the real kicker, the core of the mystery.
Yeah, this is where it gets, frustrating for researchers. Despite having the objects, knowing the time, the place, there is absolutely zero mention of them anywhere in any Roman writing.
Wait, none? Like nothing in official records, personal letters, anything?
Nothing the source points to. Nope. Not in military manuals, not in farming guides, not shown in any Roman art. No paintings, mosaics, sculptures. Nothing.
Wow.
No references in literature, poetry, nothing. It's this complete silence from the Romans themselves that is just baffling. They existed, we know they exist, and we have them, but it's like they were invisible in the historical record.
That's incredible. It really does circle back to that first thought, doesn't it? Like finding that weird thing in the wall, but there are no plans, no photos, no diaries, no newspapers, just the object sitting there.
Exactly. And because of that total lack of context, archaeologists are forced to just speculate, based purely on the object's shape, the holes, the knobs, the material, where it was found,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what it could have been used for. And that leads to a lot of theories.
Right. And the article goes through a whole bunch of them. Let's tackle some of the main ones. Where do we even start?
Well, one that pops up a lot, maybe because some were found near military sites, is the idea they were some kind of rangefinder for the army.
A rangefinder. How would this 12-sided thing help you figure out distances?
The thinking is, maybe by looking through different pairs of holes, maybe using the knobs somehow for alignment, you could do some basic triangulation, estimate distance. The math apparently isn't totally crazy. The source says it's, geometrically plausible.
Okay, sounds a bit fiddly, but maybe. But I remember the article pointing out some major problems with that one.
Oh, huge problems. Yeah. The biggest one is just they aren't standardized at all.
Right.
If it's a military tool for measurement, you'd expect them all to be the same size, same hole layout, right?
Right.
For consistency, they're not. Not even close sometimes.
And no markings either, like for calibration.
Nope, no markings, which you definitely need. And maybe the most telling thing, they usually show very little wear. You'd think a tool used out in the field by soldiers would get banged up, scratched, show some friction, but mostly they look pretty pristine.
So, cool idea, maybe works on paper,
Yeah.
but the actual objects don't really fit the profile of a heavily used military tool.
Hmm.
Okay. What else? Any connection to, like, everyday life? Farming?
Yeah, there's an agricultural theory, the idea that maybe it was a kind of calendar or even a type of sundial specific to the region, helping farmers figure out the best planting times based on like the angle of the sun through the holes, maybe tied to local weather patterns up north.
Using the sun to track seasons. I can picture that.
It sounds plausible on the surface, but again, big counter-arguments. For one, it seems really complicated for something. The Romans already had a perfectly good tool for the Julian calendar.
Yeah, they weren't exactly lacking for calendars.
Right. And just like the rangefinder idea, you'd expect signs of outdoor use, maybe some weathering, and they generally don't have that either.
Too complex for a simple job, and again, nowhere. Got it. Now, the article mentioned some craft-related theories. Those sounded kind of interesting, especially thinking about where some were found.
Yes. This is one of the more compelling lines of thought, I think. The idea it was a tool for craft. Specifically, the article mentions knitting, or maybe Viking wire weaving.
Hold on, Viking.
Huh.
But these are Roman, aren't they?
They are Roman artifacts found in Roman territory, yeah. But remember where that territory is Northern Europe, right up against areas with Germanic tribes, later Norse influence. So the theory connects it to a technique maybe known in the region.
Okay, so how would it work for weaving or knitting? Those holes and knobs.
Well, the different sized holes could be for different gauges of wire. If you're weaving metal chains, maybe gold ones, or different thicknesses of yarn.
Oh, okay.
And the knobs could maybe help hold loops or manage tension as you work.
Right, I can sort of visualize that.
What makes this theory neat is it seems to explain a few things at once. It gives a practical reason for the different hole sizes. And some dodecahedra actually have traces of wax on them.
Wax. Why wax?
Could have been a lubricant, maybe for pulling the wire through smoothly.
Okay.
And crucially, this theory fits quite well with them being found in the graves of elite women. High-status women in the ancient world were often linked to producing or owning valuable textiles or fine crafts.
Wow, yeah, that actually ties together the object's features, the wax residue, and the burial context with women. Seems like a strong contender. So what's the catch? Why isn't this the accepted answer?
It really is that recurring issue,
Oh.
the lack of significant wear. Even weaving fine wire or yarn through those holes over and over, you'd expect some smoothing, some abrasion, some sign of repeated contact. And generally, that's just not seen.
Huh. It's the ghost in the machine for almost every practical theory, isn't it? Nowhere. Okay, what about something totally different? Communication. Measurement of a different kind.
There's the idea it was a cipher device, for encoding messages.
Like a secret decoder ring, Roman style.
Sort of, yeah. The holes and knobs could be settings, maybe. And proponents point to that wax residue again. Perhaps it was used to seal a message rolled up inside the hollow center.
Ooh, spy stuff.
Mm.
That would explain why nobody wrote about them.
Exactly. Secrecy could be a factor.
But what's the problem there?
Well, a cipher usually makes two parts, right? The encoder and the decoder.
Okay.
Or a key. You'd expect to find something else with them, a key, instructions, maybe specific scrolls. Nothing like that has ever turned up.
Right.
And for someone else to read the message, they'd need an identical dodecahedron, or at least a perfectly standardized one. Which, again, we know they weren't.
Yeah, a cipher system where every device is different doesn't really work.
Okay.
Okay, maybe simpler. Just a basic measuring tool, a gauge.
Yep, the simple gauge theory, just used to measure the diameter of things. Sticks, wire, maybe even. The article jokingly suggests Roman pasta shapes.
Pasta gauge. I mean, the different size holes make sense for measuring something's diameter.
Logically, yes, but what's the issue?
Let me guess. Lack of standardization.
You got it. If it's a reliable gauge, you need consistent hole sizes across different examples to have a standard measure. They just don't. Plus, is a simple gauge really something you'd bury with an elite woman or find in a military officer's kit? Seems unlikely.
Okay, probably not pasta then. Any other simple household ideas? Like a candle holder.
That's been suggested too. The holes could maybe fit different widths of candles.
Seems plausible, I guess. You could stick candles in it.
You probably could. But the Romans had plenty of simpler, purpose-built candle holders. And again, does that really explain why it would be a valuable grave good? Seems a bit mundane for that context.
True. What about checking money? Like a coin validator.
Another theory floated, but it doesn't really work. When Romans clipped coins, they mostly shaved off the edges, affecting the weight, not usually the diameter, in a way these non-standard holes could reliably detect fakes.
Okay, so probably not for coins either. So
Yeah.
if it's not a simple tool, maybe it's about who made it, like showing off their skills.
The metalworker's calling card theory. The idea that a master craftsman made these really intricate objects to basically say, look how good I am, hire me.
They do look pretty complex to make. Shows skill.
Definitely. But why bury a craftsman's advert with an aristocratic lady? Or why leave it behind in a military camp? The fine spots just don't quite fit that explanation. It feels out of place.
Yeah, that seems like a stretch.
Yeah.
So that kind of pushes us towards less practical functions, doesn't it? More symbolic? Social?
Exactly. Which leads to the idea it was maybe a religious object, a spiritual talisman.
Used in rituals.
Right.
Or maybe carried for protection.
That's the thought. And this could potentially explain why they end up in graves. Maybe they had meaning for the afterlife or offered some kind of spiritual protection. And using bronze or copper, relatively valuable metals, fits with them being sacred or special.
Okay, that fits the burial context better than, say, a pasta gauge.
Right.
But that big problem comes back again, right? The lack of context.
Absolutely. If these were important religious items tied to known Roman gods or rituals, you'd really expect some kind of mention, some depiction somewhere in all the religious texts or art we have from the Romans, and there's just silence.
Still nothing. Okay,
Right.
So that brings us to what the article suggested might be, well, maybe not provable, but socially intuitive.
Yeah.
Based on who had them and where.
The idea that they were basically status symbols.
Just a fancy object to show off, like, look what I've got.
Pretty much, yeah. A kind of regional marker of status among the elite up in Gaul and Britain. Military officers, wealthy women. Owning one showed you were important, rich, maybe tapped into some specific cultural trend happening just in that area.
Like a sort of
Yeah.
Roman provincial bling.
Yeah.
Or regional fad.
Kind of. The article floats that idea. Maybe it was a short-lived fashion among the northern elite, something trendy there, but not really a thing back in Italy. That would explain why they're found with officers and in elite tombs, why they're made of decent metal, and crucially, why they aren't found in Italy.
That actually makes a weird kind of sense of the who and the where, even if it doesn't give it a specific function like it does X.
Right. It's totally speculative. The source admits that. There's no inscription saying this proves my awesomeness, but looking at where they turn up, it's a hypothesis that feels plausible, socially speaking.
Okay. And just when we're trying to wrap our heads around all these dodecahedron theories, the article mentions something else, similar but different.
Ah, right. The Roman icosahedron, found in Germany. It's a 20-sided object, also Roman, but it looks quite different. Tiny holes, much more decorated, and here's the key. Only one has ever been found.
Just one. So probably not related.
The article argues, pretty convincingly I think, that its uniqueness and different style mean it's likely just a one-off artistic piece, maybe ceremonial, but probably not part of this dodecahedron puzzle we're discussing. Just a reminder that not every weird geometric Roman thing is the same mystery.
Good point. Okay, so let's try to pull these theories together. We've got ideas ranging from practical tools, rangefinders, farm calendars, to craft tools, maybe cipher devices, simple gauges, candle holders, coin checkers, then maybe a maker's calling card. And finally, more symbolic things like religious items or just pure status symbols.
That's a pretty good summary of the lineup.
And for almost every single one, the big stumbling block is either they don't show wear and tear, or they aren't standardized, or the huge one. There's absolutely no backup from Roman writing or art.
That really nails it. Each theory has something going for it, maybe the shape, maybe the fine spot, but none of them tick all the boxes or overcome that wall of silence from the Romans themselves.
So the article finishes by kind of zooming out, right? Reflecting on what this whole puzzle tells us more broadly about history. What were some of those final thoughts?
Yeah, one big takeaway is just how easily the meaning of everyday objects can completely disappear over time, especially if there's no text or pictures to explain them. It brings us right back to that third condiment shaker.
Right, or like finding a smartphone casing in 2,000 years with no context of screens or the internet.
Yeah.
Just a weird plastic rectangle.
Exactly. It really highlights how crucial context is in archaeology. Without it, an artifact is just stuff. Its story is gone. It also reminds us that history isn't just the big stuff, emperors, wars, philosophy. It's also the little details of daily life, the regional quirks, the tools people used, maybe just the provincial elite in this case. And those smaller histories are often the ones that vanish first.
And there was a point about how we should approach these mysteries, too.
Yes, a warning, kind of, against trying too hard to find a complex answer when the evidence isn't there. Resisting the urge to, like, romanticize the artifact. Sometimes the most honest answer is just, we really don't know. Which isn't always satisfying, but might be the truth.
I also like that last bit the article mentioned about getting everyone involved.
Oh yeah, that was cool. The idea of people getting replicas of these dodecahedra and just experimenting, trying things out, see if they can figure out a use that makes sense, see what kind of wear it produces.
Turns it into a bit of a crowdsourced mystery.
Yeah, taps into collective curiosity, makes it feel less like something locked away in a museum display case.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the Roman dodecahedron,
Mm-hmm.
it's still just this fascinatingly frustrating object. We have it, we know what it looks like, roughly when and where it existed, and we have this whole list of possibilities, but none quite fit.
And the fundamental why, what was it actually for? Still completely up in the air.
And the main reason for that, the source makes clear, is that really strange, total absence of any mention, any clue in the vast records the Romans left us.
It's such a powerful reminder, this whole dodecahedron thing, of how much we don't know about the ancient world, especially the details of everyday life, the regional variations, the stuff that wasn't about emperors or legions. The small things can just slip through the cracks of history so easily.
It really is humbling. Okay, so building on that idea of forgotten objects and the article's thoughts on lost context, let's leave you, the listener, with this to think about. Consider the things you use every single day. Your phone, yeah, but maybe a specific kitchen tool, that weird gadget for your hobby, even just the remote control for your TV. Now, fast forward a couple of thousand years. Future archaeologists dig one up. What do they make of it? If all the context, the internet, manuals, pictures, videos of us using them, if all of that is just gone, could the simple, essential things we rely on now become the Roman dodecahedra of tomorrow?
That's quite a thought to end on.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into one of history's most curious and still unsolved mysteries.